Hi guys, we're going to look at our next poem by Plath. It is Poppies in July. So this is our second last poem by Plath, and it's one of her darkest poems. I'm leaving the darkest one to last, so you have that to look forward to. The poem is quite different. The images that she uses are juxtaposed against the title. We don't expect what she talks about when we have the title Poppies in July. We're expecting all things happiness, nature, it's all good stuff. It's summertime, beautiful flowers, colour, but that's not what we experience when we read through the poem. The first stanza is marked by a sense of foreboding and unease. Plath is uncomfortable, surrounded by nature. She feels uncomfortable, she feels unsafe. She talks about how the poppies are little hell flames. So again, we're starting to see that juxtaposition. Poppies, what we associate with those beautiful red flowers, are hell flames. So she's really struggling being surrounded by so much life. And also she asks them, do you do no harm? She confronts them, do you do no harm? Now, poppies are also farmed for opiates. They're an opiate, that's where heroin comes from. So she could also be referring to the dulling effects of drugs as well. And I mean drugs as in sedative drugs, drugs that anti-anxiety medication, or perhaps antidepressants, drugs like that, not illicit, illegal drugs. I'm not talking about that at all. So the title may well have led readers to believe that this is a poem about nature and its healing effects and its healing power, but it isn't. So this is how Plath uses her language and her imagery to help create a real dark sense of unease and foreboding. As we progress through the poem, Plath is searching to feel something. So she puts her hand among the flames, she says, and nothing burns. So she feels nothing. She feels empty. She is tired and numb, and she's almost transcended pain, that there is nothing left for her now, and she's really seeking something others to remove herself from this. The poppies remind her of what life can be, and she says, it exhausts me to watch you. So there is too much life, too much colour, and Plath really struggles with that. The uncomfortable and disturbed mood continues throughout stanza 4, and there are two startling images here, and they're both quite dark and both quite violent. The poppies are a mouth just bloodied, and they're bloody skirts. So there is a sense of violence here and the pain associated with that, or perhaps the violence of pain and what she's struggling with and what she's working with. She talks in Elm, in the last poem that we're going to study, she talks about this dark thing that lives inside me, and she starts to give life to it here in Poppies in July, where there is a violent need for her to remove herself, or to try to fight this dark thing that lives inside her, and she pendulums back and forth between whether she can fight it and that need, that I suppose instinctive desire to live, and the exhaustion that comes with mental health illnesses, basically. So the imagery is quite violent. It's assonant in nature. There's broad vowels, mouth bloodied. The scene is drawn out for us so we can understand the pain. The poem is quite slow in its tone and its rhythm, and everything is just quite dulled, and it's almost like, I think, hearing something underwater, or hearing something that through a wall. It's quite muffled, it's quite dulled, and this is to help us to understand Plath's feeling and how she felt quite removed from the world and quite other and quite separate. In the 5th stanza, we start to see a sense of her helplessness, how she feels unable to fight, that sense of powerlessness and out of control. And we saw that in Mirror as well, where she goes back for more, and it's self-flagellating, it's getting pain, but she can't help it. She has no control over herself or how she feels, so there is no coping mechanism here. The mood becomes quite distraught, and she begs for something, to feel something, even if that feeling something is pain. And this reminds me of Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet's to be or not to be speech. And the first part is quite famous, to be or not to be, that is the question. But it goes on then, and he goes on to say, to die, to sleep perchance, to dream. And Hamlet is struggling so much with the grief that he feels over the death of his father that he can't imagine feeling anything. And to feel something means that you must be able to sleep and to dream. And that idea of dreaming, Hamlet believes, comes from a relaxed sense of state. So he can't dream, he can't sleep, and neither can Plath. And she says, if I could bleed or sleep. So to bleed or to sleep proves that you're living, that you're alive, that there's something there. And that is what Plath is struggling with. And it's an emphatic plea for release, for her to be able to somehow pull free of this dark thing that lives inside her, and to be able to gain some control and be able to push back against this sense of powerlessness and lack of control. So we start to see the charting of her, the deterioration of her mental health through Poppies in July. And that's why I look at Poppies in July and Elm together, because they are both about her struggle, and the back and forth nature of her instinctive need to live and the exhaustion that comes with that. So it goes, she kind of pendulums, as I say, back and forth. In Poppies in July, we feel that there is a sense of alienation, that she feels other, different, removed. And like I said, like the muffled, numbing effect that she kind of experiences the world as an observer, as a little bit outside of her existence. And we can't help but feel sympathy for her. The last three lines record the poet's surrender. So this is sort of like a kind of death wish, that she's been worn down by her demons. And the bright colours of the poppies, they have exhausted her too much. It's all just too much for her. And she has been just, they've won basically. And this is a good place for us then to look at Elm, to look at how we can chart her experience further. And the world becomes colourless. And I've referenced this a lot as we've talked about Plath, because I think that is a really vivid image. And that's, I suppose, a dichotomy in itself, that it's a vivid image but it's colourless. But the idea of her being suspended in a sort of ether of nothing, I think we really need to think about what that must be like for her. There is no darkness, there is no black or grey or starkness. It's just colourless, it's just nothing. So we need to take some time to think about, what does colourless mean? And what does that, I suppose, look like, I guess. So that she's suspended in this sort of colourless world where everything is, where she feels numbed and everything is sort of muffled and dulled, and she's just sort of existing in a shell-like nature as opposed to actually being able to experience the world. And she sort of drifts through this death-like, colourless private hell where the poppies are the flames and they exhaust her, and she is almost willing them to burn her so she knows she's alive, because in this suspended state she can't I suppose, as I say, experience things. So she's even calling on, even if I could feel pain, if I could feel something, I'd know I was alive. So the ending of Poppies in July is dark and joyless, and it's juxtaposed against everything that we understand a poem about flowers to be. And our experience of natural poetry comes from the Lake Isle of Innisfree, comes from daffodils, the romantic poets who used nature and the natural world as a healing power, as a sort of medicine. But Plath can't do that. Plath is confessional by nature. That's the type of poet that she is. And the poem is a cry for help, or it is just an acceptance of her world and of her existence and how this is going to affect her. And so where William Wordsworth celebrated the host of golden daffodils, Plath decries the red poppies, the little hell flames, the bloodied skirts, the little bloodied mouth. She decries that and she pushes back against that.